Ever since I first watched The Incredibles, I've been hooked on the idea that there's more to this world than what we saw on screen. Heroes with wild powers, messy personal lives, complicated backstories, and in some cases, tragic ends. So today, I want to do something I've been meaning to do for a long time. Rank every super from the NSA files. So yeah, at number 15, I've got Stormicide. And honestly, this one hits different because when I first read her NSA file, I wanted to root for her. She was this grad student in chemistry, balancing school, hero work, and even caring for her sick uncle. Her power set, absorbing and releasing vapors, had so much potential too. Tear gas, knockout gas, even acidic clouds and flight through helium. That's creative, dangerous, and kind of brilliant. But in practice, it just didn't click the way it needed to. She had to rely on what gases were around her, which made her slower and less adaptable than other supers who could just snap their fingers and unleash power. People teased her for it too, made her the butt of the joke, and it's clear she was sensitive to that. And honestly, I don't blame her. It's hard enough to be a hero without feeling like the world's laughing at you. That's why she's last on my list. Not because she didn't have heart, but because her whole legacy feels like a tragedy. She deserved more, but in this ranking, she's number 15 out of 15. Plasma Bolt is one of those supers I wish we knew more about. And man, this one leaves me conflicted, because on one hand, she sounds awesome. Plasma waves shooting from her hands, wings that let her fly, crazy agility that made her the muscle of the Phantasmics. And then outside the mask, she's just this forest ranger who loves the outdoors and wants to keep that life separate. I actually love that. It makes her feel real, like someone who's grounded even while doing insane superhero stuff. But here's the thing, we barely know her. Her NSA audio file literally erased itself because of her electromagnetic aura. And after that, she basically vanishes into mystery. Was she taken out in Operation Kronos? Did she somehow survive as the last Phantasmic standing? We don't get an answer, and that stings. It's like she's right on the edge of being one of the most interesting supers, but the story never gives her the spotlight to really prove it. That's why I've got her down here at number 14, not because she wasn't cool, but because she feels unfinished, like a hero frozen in what if, instead of remembered for what she actually did. Splashdown has this almost mythical vibe to him, with his obsession with Atlantis and his oceanic powers, and I'll be honest, this one just feels sad. On paper, he had so much going for him. An oceanographer obsessed with Atlantis, a guy who could breathe underwater, zip through the ocean like a missile, even command sea life and bend water to his will. That's such a cool concept, and you can imagine him being the perfect hero for coastal rescues or massive disasters at sea. But the reality is, he was a little too tied to his element. On land, away from the water, he just couldn't bring the same punch as the more versatile supers. And the way he went out? It's almost cruel. His cape got caught in a vortex and he just disappeared, missing in action, lost to the very element he lived for. There's something deeply ironic, almost poetic about it, but also frustrating because it robs him of the chance to really prove himself. That's why he lands at number 13 for me. I respect him, I admire the uniqueness of his powers, but his story feels unfinished. A hero who should have made waves, but instead got swallowed. This was the kid sidekick who grew into their own hero. Macroburst had something really special. The ability to whip up high-velocity winds, strong enough to knock enemies flat, launch themselves through the air, and basically weaponize the atmosphere itself. They weren't just a flyer. They owned the skies. Agile, enduring, able to fight for long stretches without wearing down. There's a reason they were the first super to actually take down an Omnidrome. But the sad part is, it didn't last. The next version, the VX2, learned, adapted, and took them out. Just like that, their triumph turned into a tragedy. What makes Macroburst stand out to me is their personality. They were different, androgynous, kind of mysterious, obsessed with keeping their hair perfect despite the constant wind swirling around them. And beneath the power, they had real human fears, like their claustrophobia, that made them feel relatable in a way a lot of other supers didn't. Macroburst was bold, unique, and even historic in their own way, but their story is a flash of brilliance, followed by silence. They proved the Omnidroids could be beaten, but in the end, their legacy is more about what could have been than what was. At number 11, I've got Apogee, and honestly, she's one of the most fascinating what-ifs in the entire NSA line. On the surface, her powers were incredible. Gravity control. She could suspend enemies mid-air, slam them into the ground, or hurl objects around like they were toys. That's the kind of ability that can turn a fight on its head in an instant, and paired with her endurance and solar-enhanced suit, she had the makings of a powerhouse. But here's the catch. Her strength literally rose and fell with the sun. Midday, she was unstoppable. But at night, in heavy clouds, during an eclipse, she was powerless. And that limitation shaped so much of her story. She even joked about how it made her look ridiculous if something went down, and you can hear the frustration in her voice. In the end, she went down to the Omnidroid VX4, and I can't help but imagine Syndrome exploited her biggest weakness, taking her out when the sun wasn't there. That's why Apogee lands here at number 11 for me. She had raw talent, killer powers, and a strong personality, but her limitations, both in her abilities and her attitude, kept her from rising high. On paper, his powers were impressive. Sonic projection strong enough to shake buildings, overwhelm enemies. And I kind of love that his civilian life tied into it, being an opera singer by day and a sonic warrior by night. But here's the thing, Phylange never quite found his footing, either with the public or with his peers. He struggled with image, trying desperately to make a superhero yodel happen, while people like Mr. Incredible openly mocked him for it. That insecurity bled into his career, and while he insisted he left the Thrilling Three on good terms, it's hard not to feel the bitterness in how he saw it as Gazerbeam's gang. Personality-wise, he could be abrasive, selfish even, and that didn't help his case. He had the talent, he had the flair, but he was never fully embraced. And while his voice could move mountains, it couldn't carry him into true greatness. At number 9, I've got Dynaguy, and honestly, part of why I love talking about him is just how unintentionally funny he is. This man literally came up with his superhero while sitting in a diner, smashed Diner and Guy together, and boom! Dynaguy was born. There isn't a whole lot we can get from Dino Guy other than he shot disintegration rays from his forehead, and he was the original member of the Thrilling Three, only to be replaced by Gazerbeam after he died. It's also written down, the NSA managed to recover his ion propulsion gauntlets and considered reassigning them to another hero after his death. Everseer has this mix of brilliance and strangeness, and he's one of those supers who fascinates me because he's so powerful, yet so deeply flawed. On the surface, the guy was a powerhouse. He could read minds, see into the future, blast enemies with psychic energy, even zoom his vision in and out like a living telescope. He was smart, calculated, and sharp enough to lead the Phantasmics. You look at his abilities and think, this guy should have been unstoppable. But here's the thing, for all that strength, Everseer got in his own. He was a germaphobe, borderline obsessive, avoiding close combat not because he didn't need to, but because he was terrified of the mess of human contact. He'd hide that fear by bragging he could win with his mind alone. And honestly, that insecurity made him feel oddly human. And the irony? For a man who could supposedly see 10 years into the future, he didn't see Syndrome or the Omnidroid. I'm putting Downburst. And honestly, he's one of the most underrated supers in the entire NSA line. On the surface, he didn't have the flashiest powers. He wasn't hurling fireballs or freezing oceans. But his atomic manipulation was quietly incredible. He could reshape matter, heal wounds, even open up portals for teleportation. That versatility alone makes him stand out. And the fact that he used those same abilities to design and literally name Elastigirl's iconic Elasticycle just cements his place in the lore. What I love about Downburst is how human he feels. Starting off as a guy working in a doctor's office, underappreciated, looking for a more exciting life. He had rivalries, crushes that went nowhere, even insecurities about his standing in the super community. But he proved himself. He's one of the few heroes who actually managed to defeat an Omnidroid, the X2, before being taken down the X3. That's huge, and it shows just how far he'd come with his powers. Metaman feels like the legend of this entire roster, and if there's one word that comes to mind with him, it's wasted potential. This guy was the definition of a powerhouse, super strength that rivaled Mr. Incredible, flight, teleportation, magnetic manipulation, X-ray vision, invisibility, even the ability to talk to dolphins if he wanted to. He was basically a Swiss Army knife of superpowers, a one-man Justice League, and the NSA trusted him so much they were actually considering putting him in charge of overseeing every other superhero team. That tells you just how respected he was. But here's where the tragedy comes in. He didn't die in some grand showdown or a noble sacrifice. He died because his cape got snagged in an elevator shaft. The mighty Metaman, the guy who could have changed the balance of the entire super community, taken out by a design flaw in his suit. And that's why he lands at 6 for me. He had the powers, he had the presence, he had the potential to go toe-to-toe with anyone Syndrome could throw at him, maybe even the Omnidroid itself. Blazestone is one of the supers I can't stop thinking of. She wasn't just powerful, she was fiery in every sense of the word. Those pyrotechnic blasts weren't just fireworks. They were lethal. She could light up the sky and turn a fight into chaos in seconds. But what makes her stand out to me isn't just the spectacle, it's the messiness of her story. She came from a rough past, even did time in jail, and the NSA had her on a short leash from day one. She was temperamental, unpredictable, talking so fast you could barely keep up with her. And yeah, she clashed with teammates like Universal Man and even fell into crime again. But that's also what makes her feel so real. She wasn't polished like some of the Golden Age icons. She was raw, flawed, and passionate. And the fact that Frozone, one of the coolest heads in the game, saw something in her says a lot about her spark. Hey, totally unrelated, but I've been working on something I think you'll actually find useful. It's called Doc2Data.online. It's this tool I built that turns PDFs and even scanned or handwritten stuff into perfect spreadsheets. No messy columns, no missing decimals. And here's the cool part. You can actually tell the AI exactly which columns to extract, and it keeps everything perfectly lined up the way you need it. Oh, and it's completely free and ad-free. It's been super handy for me, and I think a lot of you might like it too. Clean, accurate spreadsheets in seconds. Link in the description below. Psychway, and let me tell you, she's the one who honestly unsettles me the most. Her powers weren't flashy in the way fireballs or super strength are, but they cut deeper. She could slip into your head, twist your thoughts, freeze your mind, even make you act against your will. That's terrifying. And the way she talked about it, laughing about making guys dump their girlfriends just so she'd date them, it wasn't some tortured confession. It was casual, almost gleeful. That's what makes her so chilling to me. She had this incredible gift, and instead of using it responsibly, she treated people like toys to practice on. But at the same time, that's also what makes her fascinating. She wasn't a clean-cut hero. She was messy, paranoid, selfish, and real in a way that almost makes you forget she's supposed to be a good guy. The only thing that kept her from being higher on this list is that, against machines like the Omni Droid, her abilities didn't mean much. And maybe that's why she went down when she did. At number 3, I've got Hypershock, and honestly, he's the perfect example of why I find these NSA files so haunting. On the surface, he was a powerhouse. This was the guy who could literally crack the earth with his fists, send shockwaves through city blocks, and even brought down the Omnidroid VX3, which is insane when you think about how many supers never even made it that. But behind that raw power was a man who was rough around the edges. He drank too much, he had a temper flip in a heartbeat, and he needed constant validation to keep himself steady. You can practically hear it in his file. This guy with all the power in the world, also all the volatility, and that contradiction is what makes him so fascinating. On the battlefield, he was unstoppable, but as a person, he was unpredictable, maybe even dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with humans. And yet, despite all of that, he mattered, because he proved supers weren't gods, flaws, egos, and demons. I've got Gazerbeam, and honestly, this one gets me emotional every single time. I still remember the first time I watched The Incredibles as a kid, when Bob stumbles into that cave and the camera pans over to Gazerbeam's skeleton with Kronos carved into the wall. I wasn't expecting something that heavy in a Pixar movie, and it's stuck with me ever since. The idea that he knew he was going to die, but still used his last ounce of strength to leave behind a clue that would save others. That's the kind of heroism that gives me chills, even now. What makes it hit harder is that Gazerbeam wasn't some random extra. He was a friend of Bob's. He was in the thick of things with Frozone. And, my favorite little detail, he was close with Gammajack, who was basically the definition of chaotic energy. That contrast always fascinated me. Gazerbeam, the calm, almost monotone guy who had to avoid eye contact so he didn't accidentally burn people alive, hanging around with his volatile nuclear hothead. It's such an odd friendship, and honestly, I'd love Pixar to dig into it if they ever make The Incredibles 3. I feel like there's so much more to him that we never got to see. But even with what little screen time he had, his legacy is massive. His lasers were insanely powerful, sure, but that's not why he ranks so high for me. It's because in the end, he wasn't thinking about glory or survival. He was thinking about helping the next person after him. And that final act, dying in the dark, so someone else could carry the torch, is exactly why I'll always remember Gazerbeam as one of the greatest supers in this universe. Alright, so here we are, number 1. And for me, it has to be Gammajack. And I'll be honest with you, this guy doesn't make the top spot because I like him. He makes it because he's the one I just can't stop thinking about. Every time I go back to those NSA tapes, Gammajack feels less like a superhero and more like someone ripped straight out of a nightmare. He's handsome, cocky, charming in that superficial way, but when you really listen to what he's saying, it's disturbing. The man openly admits to prioritizing attractive women over anyone else in a crisis. He talks about killing villains like it's nothing, and his powers? Radiation bursts. Not just flashy energy beams. No, this is stuff that could incinerate you instantly or poison you slowly. That's horrifying, especially in the hands of someone this unstable. And that's why he reminds me so much of Homeland. The smile, the swagger, the savior act. But underneath, he's dangerous, narcissistic, and honestly, kind of terrifying. I always think about how insane it is. The world of The Incredibles was already so quick to turn against superheroes when someone like Gamma Jack was still out there, strutting around, treating lives like a checklist. The fact that the NSA had him on constant high-level monitoring tells you they knew he was a risk. They just couldn't rein him in. But here's the thing. As much as I hate him, I also kind of wish Pixar had kept him alive. Because characters like Gamma Jack show us the dark side of superheroes, the side that's messy, ugly, frightening, and I would love to see The Incredibles 3 tackle it. What happens when someone this powerful and this broken decides they don't want to play by the rules anymore? That what if is exactly why he's #1 for me. Because out of everyone in these files, Gamma Jack isn't just another tragic death. He's the one that makes me shiver how close this world came to having its own home.